Okay, we're back. We're still talking X-Men Days of Future Past. This time we're talking spoilers, which means that we don't have to tap dance around what I was going to say our issues, but it's going to be their issues because they've got more issues with this movie than I do. Mine are few and far between. I was very happy, and I feel like you guys enjoyed it somewhat. So what did work for you?
Just start?
No.
So one of the things that I thought worked well for me, one of the things that I enjoyed immensely was I thought the threat of the Sentinels was established well. I thought they did it early in the film. They showed us a few of them. They showed us mutants that I'd argue we didn't necessarily care about, but mutants nonetheless fighting and failing to defeat these things, in fact being killed by these Sentinels. And later on, when you show us a whole army of them, I am concerned.
When Iceman had his head taken off, and his frozen head skids across the floor.
Yep.
I kind of had this, okay. I wasn't shocked that he would die because I knew going in the crux was going to be change the future. So any character we see in the future timeline can be killed. I knew that coming in. But to see it done that brutally, for lack of a better term, I was like, okay, yeah, all right.
And I liked the basic premise of the movie. It's an old story, but I liked the setup that they need to send a mutant back to avert this dystopian future. And I liked, most of the time, I liked the parallels between them. And I liked when we saw certain ramifications from the past infringing on the future timeline.
Well, I know for you, I could hear you jittering next to me during Quicksilver's big scene,
which is easily the showstopper, and I think the highlight of the film, and it was very clear that everyone that worked on that particular scene loved it. It was probably fun to do. It was probably fun to act, to animate, and it was fun to watch. Everyone in the audience enjoyed it. I don't think there was anything you could have done better in that particular scene. It was pretty much, aside from the story issue associated with it, a perfect moment in that film, and almost a perfect character introduction, in terms of like, here is a real example of what he can do. Here it is. This is what it could look like, and this is also why we can't use him in the rest of the movie.
Well, I understand that, and you're not the first one to bring it up. I've seen it mentioned elsewhere that people are, well, why did they leave behind him? It's like, well, because it's a logical problem. It's the same reason that Harry Potter can't have the time turner after the third movie, because it fixes everything.
Okay, so the plan is to stop the assassination of Bolivar Trask, and that is going to prevent the creation of the Sentinel program.
Peter Dinklage.
But he had already created Sentinels before that. Trask should not have been the target for Mystique. And I think that had more to do with the fact that we've got Peter Dinklage, we need to use him.
Right.
We need to make him a bigger part, because I don't know if he's the guy you kill off in order to do this. It seems like he's the guy who pounces on the opportunity when the president or somebody else is killed off.
You're correct, but also remember, Mystique was not after him to stop the Sentinel program. Mystique was after him because he'd been experimenting on mutants, and she knew that. So she was after him for revenge. They were trying to stop Mystique because that set off this whole other thing. When she was first trying to kill him, she knew nothing about the Sentinel program. She didn't know, she didn't care. She was going to kill him no matter what, which was actually part of the problem later on, because even being told what was going to happen, she's still like, no, I need to kill this guy, at least for a little while.
Right, which undermined her whole character. And there were a lot of people acting stupidly. Mystique was one. The other one is Eric Magneto, later on, when he decides that at all costs he has to kill Mystique, even in a brutal open battle in front of the embassy, on live television. Although I have to be honest, I don't get a lot of the reasoning for what Eric does. Well, I don't understand why he has to kill her. He can easily capture Beast, right? And hold him down. He could grab anybody there. He threw cops around, but he has to kill Mystique.
With Magneto is he does not have a ton of time to plan. He gets busted out, told what's going on, and then they're in Paris almost immediately. So he's coming up with a plan on the fly, as best as he's able to, with information that is kind of insane.
End of this movie, he's doing something, and it feels crazy. It feels like it comes out of left field. And for me, there's this, and I talk about this, the moment in the plane, right? Where he takes control of the airplane and he's screaming at Charles. In that beat is where you tell the audience that humans are the secondary, evolutionary backwater, and that we are now going to rise up, and this is where we're going to do it. And he doesn't do it. He doesn't do it, and he doesn't tell us. And so that when we get to that point in the movie, we're like, well, wait a minute. We thought he was on the side of, saving people. They made him a hero. Right? He tried to save Kennedy. But
yes, but they also had to drop that line that Kennedy was actually a mutant, which makes it all very consistent. The status quo is not enough. He needs to put the mutants on the top. Now, again, if you want to pick holes in what his plan is and how it's going to work, I'll admit it's not foolproof. But I think given what his goal is, and that his goal is not what everyone else's goal is. Mm-hmm. Everyone else's goal is prevent this future. His goal is I'm completely rewriting this entire book because they just want it to be what it is now. That's not enough for me. Mm-hmm. So him taking it a step further, you have to keep in mind, he's not taking it a step further because he doesn't think they're not doing enough to save the future. He thinks that the future they're trying to save isn't the future that he wants. The future he's fighting for is not the future everyone else is fighting for.
Right. Except they give that line to Charles. That I don't want your future line is Charles's line, and it should be Eric's.
That's fair.
But just touching back on Peter Dinklage, he was part of the reason I went, talking about actors I want to see do stuff. And I thought he was grossly underused. I thought that we had no emotional connection with Trask in any way. And what I mean by that is we had no firm understanding of why Trask wanted the mutants dead.
For a story about the Sentinels, you need a human element to the story. And Trask was it, and we didn't get any human connection to him.
I don't think it's a particularly emotional choice for him. It's a simple question of survival. It's like, yes, these people are the next evolution in humanity, but that means we go away. It's a very cold, very scientific approach to it, as opposed to sort of the more gut level emotional, oh my god, I'm scared of these things, which is what we have usually gotten with the human villains in these movies and in the comics.
But for the sake of drama, I would rather have that emotional response than the cold scientific one.
For me, I don't think I needed it because I think we were getting enough emotional weight out of the actual mutant characters and just from enough conflict that was going on with them.
The one thing that bothered me when the movie ended.
The one thing, really?
Right?
Now that we've gone through 50 others,
right? Was when the movie ended, I had this. There was one glaring issue for me, and for me it was that the ticking clock in the quote real world,
the future timeline,
the future, right, was essentially non-existent. The group had made it to this safe house in Tibet. I don't even know.
China somewhere.
Right? And they're okay, right? The Sentinels aren't there. The Sentinels aren't coming. Apparently, they don't know where they are. They do eventually show up. But the problem was that we would go back and forth between these places, and we would see them there. And aside from Wolverine stabbing Kitty Pryde, there really wasn't anything bad sort of going on there. And I desperately wanted something bad to be going on there, because I needed for what Kitty and what Wolverine were doing to be under pressure, to be under stress, so that when we went back to the real world, I would be worrying about what was happening there. And there wasn't really a time where I worried about it until we got to the very, very end, where it felt like way too late. It felt like it was like, okay, now it's a threat, now there's a problem, and now it's like way too much. Like it's 1,000, Sentinels are coming. Right. And so that was the one issue I walked out of the movie with. At that moment, and then I started to think about it a little more.
I feel like, and correct me if I feel like you guys basically needed the 6-hour miniseries version of this story.
Well, I feel like a story like this demands it.
Well, I'm came away satisfied, but I'm just, and I'm not going to call this a fault, but this is just me. I'm a guy who is okay with not all the dots being connected. Not that I'm saying you guys need your hands held. I don't mean to belittle you like that, but I kind of like holes. Like I like not knowing exactly how Charles and Eric came to resolve their differences, because what's more important is the contrast between where they are, where the relationship is in the 70s versus where it is when, as far as they're concerned, they're at the end of their lives. It's that contrast that's important, not necessarily what event caused them to then be okay with each other. So I just, as a viewer, personally, am more okay with those kinds of holes.
Again, I might have been more forgiving of some of these problems if I didn't have so many problems. Again, I found fault with almost every element of the movie.
Interestingly enough, most of the things that you say you had issues with in this are the things that I'm worried about for X-Men Apocalypse. Because here's the thing. Regardless of whether you think they did it well or not, this is a 2-hour, 20-minute, very complicated movie. I mean, this is a complex, complicated, layered movie based off of 2 issues.
Yeah.
The Days of Future Past storyline was 2 issues of the comic book.
Right.
Apocalypse is like that. And they're gonna make 1 movie.
Right.
And this is where we start to bitch about a movie that hasn't even been made yet. Right. One thing this movie did, setting aside the post-credit sequence, that I certainly appreciate and that comic book movies don't seem to want to do anymore, is that it felt complete. It felt like this story finished being told, which in the world of comic book movies we're not really getting anymore, and I'm starting to get very concerned by that fact.
The sort of fear that the comic book movies are becoming more like comic book issues, where it's just, they never really end. It's never a full story. It's always, okay, we're going to drop this cliffhanger because you need to come back for the next issue. The next chapter.
We're glad you had fun, but we got to push the next issue, and you never give people true resolution as a result of that. I mean,
the latest Spider-Man movie was the perfect case.
Again, I still haven't seen it, but that, I mean, I've heard that. But you know, aside from this is one of the only recent comic book movies that I can think of, aside from Dark Knight Rises, that feels like a definitive wrap-up closure. We can walk away now.
That was very much the feeling that I was getting at the very end when we saw the cameos from the older cast, particularly the ones who weren't advertised, the Scott and Jean.
Right.
I loved seeing those 2 together. That was among all of the many, many problems with the 3rd X-Men movie. My least favorite was how Cyclops was handled. So I loved seeing him, and I was kind of waiting for, once he woke up and we were seeing all those characters, I was like, we're going to see James Marsden as Scott again. We're going to see him. And I did a little jump for joy.
I just can't wait to see them, frankly, in the 80s.
That's the next one.
Because I enjoyed the 60s, loved what they did with the 70s, which I didn't think was overplayed, by the way. I was like, oh, I really don't want to see my characters disco dancing that I love. And
where was Dazzler? Damn it!
I was just going to say, where was Dazzler? She better be in the 80s.
Oh dear. I guess that about wraps it up on that one. So thanks for stopping by, guys. Thanks for seeing the movie with me, and thanks for talking about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And until next time, this council is adjourned.